It was 8 a.m., August 6, 1945. Hiroshima awoke under a sky as clear and calm as any summer morning could be. Children ran along cobblestone streets, their laughter echoing between the low-rise buildings. Mothers called to their children from open windows, carrying breakfast and guiding toddlers. Factory workers set out for their shifts, bicycles rattling across wooden bridges. Soldiers walked in formation, polished boots tapping against the pavement, performing drills like any ordinary day. The city was alive, unaware that history was about to change forever. Far above, at 31,000 feet, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay sliced silently through the early morning sky. Inside, Colonel Paul Tibbets and his crew were executing a mission that would alter the course of humanity. The uranium bomb in the bomb bay, codenamed Little Boy, was a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. Its power was unimaginable, its destruction total. Below, the city continued its routine, blissfully unaware of the shadow descending from the heavens. Every laugh, every step, every routine act was about to be swept away in an instant. In Tokyo, Japanese military radio operators were performing routine morning checks. Unbeknownst to them, the last transmission from Hiroshima would be sent within minutes, a broken, desperate message that would echo through history forever. Hiroshima, massive flash, city, destroyed, can't, and then silence. Before we begin, take a moment. Look at the time and place you're watching this video from right now, and leave it in the comments. Share this video with your family and friends, because history only teaches us when it is passed on. Subscribe to this channel for more untold stories like this. Real voices, real events from the war that changed the world forever.
The city of Hiroshima, 1945, was ordinary. Its people, ordinary. Its streets, ordinary. And yet, that ordinary morning would become extraordinary. At 8:01 a.m., the Enola Gay crew completed their final checks. Altimeters calibrated, bomb bay doors secured. Coordinates of the city verified. Every detail was perfect, every calculation precise, every heartbeat tense. By 8:10 a.m., the city came into view. The rivers glimmered under the sunlight. The factories hummed with activity. Schools filled with children. Homes stood untouched by the ravages of war. A city that had survived conventional bombings and air raids, but now it was a target of something the world had never seen. Colonel Tibbets adjusted his glasses and peered through the cockpit. For a moment, the hum of the engines was the only sound. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, alive and oblivious. Inside, the crew's hands were steady, but their hearts were heavy. They knew that the next moment could change everything. The countdown began in silence. Every second passed slowly, pregnant with tension. Hiroshima was a city on the edge, unaware that its fate had already been sealed.
At 8:15 a.m., the bomb was released. It fell silently, almost elegantly, cutting through the air like a meteor. Then came a flash brighter than 1,000 suns. Temperatures soared to unimaginable levels. The shockwave raced across the city. Buildings, roads, homes, vaporized in seconds. Inside the military communications center, Japanese operators tried to send reports. A voice crackled through the radio. Hiroshima, massive flash, city, destroyed, can't, and then silence. That broken, unfinished transmission was the last message ever sent from Hiroshima. In Tokyo, officers stared at the radios in disbelief. No signal could be re-established. No messages from military units, no reports from civil offices. Hiroshima seemed to have vanished. Reconnaissance planes were dispatched. What they returned with would haunt the Japanese forever. A mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the sky, visible over 100 miles away. Buildings reduced to ash, streets flattened, homes obliterated. Entire neighborhoods erased in seconds. Hiroshima was no longer a city. It was a warning.
The flight of the Enola Gay. High above the clouds, the Enola Gay cut through the early morning sky like a silver arrow. The hum of its engines was steady, almost soothing, but inside, the crew's hearts raced. They were on a mission that no human had ever attempted before, a mission that would forever change the course of history. At the controls was Colonel Paul Tibbets, the pilot. Every movement of his hands was precise, every decision weighed with the knowledge of what lay below. Beside him, Captain Robert Lewis, his co-pilot, adjusted his instruments, scanning the skies for turbulence, enemy aircraft, anything that could go wrong. In the bomb bay, the uranium device known as Little Boy rested like a sleeping giant, silent and deadly. The crew had trained for months, rehearsing the release, the altitude, and the precise timing. Every calculation had been verified again and again, yet as they approached Hiroshima, a sense of tension hung in the cabin. Below, the city stretched out, unsuspecting. Rivers gleamed in the morning sun. Factories puffed smoke. Schoolchildren laughed in the courtyards. Soldiers marched in formation. Nothing indicated that an unimaginable force was about to descend from the heavens. The navigator, Major Thomas Farabee, called out adjustments, ensuring the Enola Gay was on target. The bombardier, Captain Theodore Van Kirk, double-checked the settings on Little Boy. Each second brought them closer to the moment of no return. The crew understood the weight of what they carried. This was not just a mission, it was a harbinger of a new era, an era of weapons with power beyond comprehension. Every man aboard knew the destruction that would follow, yet they pressed on, bound by duty and history. As the city below grew larger, the final checks were completed. Altimeters verified, coordinates locked, bomb doors secured. The air was tense with anticipation. Outside, Hiroshima thrived in its ordinary morning rhythm, oblivious to the fate descending from above. Colonel Tibbets adjusted his glasses, peering through the cockpit. The streets below wound like veins through the city. Rivers shimmered in the sunlight. Homes stood peacefully, and people went about their day. In that moment, the city was beautiful. And yet, within minutes, it would become a scene of unimaginable horror. The crew held their breath as they reached the final approach. The tension in the cabin was palpable, silent, broken only by the hum of the engines. This was the moment that would define their lives, the moment that would change the world forever. Then, at the precise moment, Colonel Tibbets gave the order. The bomb bay doors opened. Little Boy began its fall toward the unsuspecting city below. In those seconds, the crew watched as the device disappeared into the sky. The city beneath continued its morning routine, unaware. The distance closed rapidly. The final moments before the release were stretched taut like a drawn bow. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the cabin. And then, it happened. The bomb descended toward history, toward destiny, toward Hiroshima. The stage was set for the single most consequential event of the war, a moment that would be etched in every history book to follow. Above the city, the Enola Gay maintained its altitude. The crew watched, tense and silent. They knew that within moments,
everything below would be changed forever. They had done their duty, but the world below would now bear the cost. The flight of the Enola Gay, calm in its precision, carried the weight of humanity's greatest power, a reminder that technology could create destruction on a scale never imagined. This was the last flight of ordinary skies over Hiroshima, and it was about to become extraordinary in the most terrifying way.
The bomb release and immediate effects. At the precise moment the uranium bomb Little Boy fell silently from the Enola Gay. For the crew, there was a tense stillness, an almost surreal calm as they watched it disappear into the sky. Below, Hiroshima thrived in ordinary life. Children's laughing, mothers carrying baskets, workers moving through the streets, completely unaware of the invisible force descending toward them. Then came the flash. A blinding light brighter than 1,000 suns tore across the city. The sky itself seemed to ignite. Temperatures soared into the thousands of degrees, vaporizing everything at the epicenter. Buildings, roads, homes, people instantly erased in the searing heat. The shockwave followed immediately, a rolling wave of destruction that leveled streets and shattered structures. Trees were stripped bare, and the rivers bubbled violently as the energy of the bomb ripped through the environment. Inside the city, Japanese military radio operators scrambled to send reports. A voice crackled through the static, desperate and terrified. Hiroshima, massive flash, city, destroyed, can't. And then, silence. Those were the last words ever transmitted from Hiroshima. Every operator, soldier, and civilian manning radios was gone. The voice of the city had been silenced forever. Across the city, survivors later recounted moments of incomprehensible horror. Shadows were burned into walls where people had once stood. Streets that had been bustling a moment before were now unrecognizable. Rivers carried debris, bodies, and ash, filling with the remnants of ordinary life obliterated in an instant. Those who survived the initial blast wandered through the ruins, disoriented and bleeding, their clothes torn, their skin seared. Fires raged uncontrollably, consuming what little remained. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles under the force of the explosion.
Approximately 70,000 people died instantly, and tens of thousands more would succumb in the following weeks from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness. The city's skyline was gone. What remained was a desolate landscape of ash, smoke, and fire. In Tokyo, military officers stared in disbelief at their radios. Signals could not be reestablished. No reports came from military units. No civil offices responded. It was as if Hiroshima had vanished from the world. Reconnaissance planes were quickly dispatched. When they returned, the pilots brought back a vision of devastation that would haunt Japan forever. A giant mushroom cloud rising into the sky, visible over 100 miles away. Streets flattened, neighborhoods destroyed. Factories, schools, homes, hospitals, gone. The Japanese High Command could hardly comprehend what had occurred. How could a single bomb cause such devastation? Was it an air raid, an accident, or a weapon unlike anything humanity had seen before? Meanwhile, among the few survivors, stories of human resilience and horror emerged. Some were shielded by collapsed buildings. Others were thrown from one side of the street to the other. People wandered through the ruins searching for loved ones, only to find emptiness or shadows burned permanently into walls. In those first horrifying moments, Hiroshima was no longer a city. It was a warning, a stark reminder of the destructive power of human innovation and the unimaginable cost of war. Tokyo's reaction and military panic. In Tokyo, hundreds of miles away, officers in the Imperial General Headquarters stared at their radios in disbelief. Their instruments crackled, whined, and failed to pick up any signals from Hiroshima. No reports came from military units.
No civil offices responded. It was as if the city had been wiped from the map.
Panic began to ripple through the corridors of power. Officers frantically tried to re-establish communication, calling on every possible channel, every relay, every radio frequency. Messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening. Emergency meetings were convened immediately. The Japanese High Command, already strained by years of total war, now faced the unimaginable. Senior officers and advisors gathered, their faces pale, their minds racing. Was it a conventional bombing raid? Had Hiroshima been hit by a new type of superweapon? Or was this the beginning of something even worse, something humanity had never seen before? Physicists and military strategists were summoned. Among them was Yoshio Nishina, one of Japan's leading physicists. Nishina examined reports, aerial photographs, and reconnaissance data as quickly as possible. His conclusion chilled the officers to their core. This was atomic energy, unleashed in a way that no city could survive. The force was absolute, complete, and unprecedented. One bomb had annihilated a city in moments. The implications sank in. Every officer understood immediately Japan's cities were vulnerable to this terrifying new weapon. Nothing in their experience could prepare them for the scale of destruction. The very idea of conventional warfare seemed inadequate. Battles, trenches, and tanks were irrelevant against a force that could erase entire neighborhoods in seconds. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate in Tokyo. Some officers speculated wildly, insisting it might be sabotage, a miscalculation, or even divine punishment. Others whispered that Japan could not withstand another strike. Anxiety spread as reports from other regions began to trickle in. Stragglers from Hiroshima, burned and scarred, told stories of a city obliterated beyond recognition. The High Command convened yet another meeting. This time they debated the unthinkable. Could a nation survive the wrath of atomic energy? Outside these halls, ordinary citizens went about their day, unaware of the catastrophic reality shaping their future. The disconnect between the calm streets of Tokyo and the burning ruins of Hiroshima created a surreal tension, a world on the brink of realizing its new vulnerability. Panic began to ripple through the corridors of power. Officers frantically tried to re-establish communication, calling on every possible channel, every relay, every radio frequency. Messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening. Emergency meetings were convened immediately. The Japanese High Command, already strained by years of total war, now faced the unimaginable. Senior officers and advisors gathered, their faces pale, their minds racing. Was it a conventional bombing raid? Had Hiroshima been hit by a new type of superweapon? Or was this the beginning of something even worse, something humanity had never seen before? Physicists and military strategists were summoned. Among them was Yoshio Nishina, one of Japan's leading physicists. Nishina examined reports, aerial photographs, and reconnaissance data as quickly as possible. His conclusion chilled the officers to their core. This was atomic energy, unleashed in a way that no city could survive. The force was absolute, complete, and unprecedented. One bomb had annihilated a city in moments. The implications sank in. Every officer understood immediately Japan's cities were vulnerable to this terrifying new weapon. Nothing in their experience could prepare them for the scale of destruction. The very idea of conventional warfare seemed inadequate. Battles, trenches, and tanks were irrelevant against a force that could erase entire neighborhoods in seconds. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate in Tokyo. Some officers speculated wildly, insisting it might be sabotage, a miscalculation, or even divine punishment. Others whispered that Japan could not withstand another strike. Anxiety spread as reports from other regions began to trickle in. Stragglers from Hiroshima, burned and scarred, told stories of a city obliterated beyond recognition. The High Command convened yet another meeting. This time they debated the unthinkable. Could a nation survive the wrath of atomic energy? Outside these halls, ordinary citizens went about their day, unaware of the catastrophic reality shaping their future. The disconnect between the calm streets of Tokyo and the burning ruins of Hiroshima created a surreal tension, a world on the brink of realizing its new vulnerability.
I held the hands of my students, but many of them were gone,
vaporized in a second. The shadows burned into walls. I couldn't recognize anything. Rivers, once lifelines of the city, were filled with debris and the bodies of those who had been caught in the blast. Survivors wandered aimlessly, dazed and bleeding, searching desperately for family members or friends who had vanished. Many were covered in burns or stripped of clothing, their skin blistered and blackened by the searing heat. Hospitals were quickly overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses, some injured themselves, struggled to tend to the wounded. The influx of patients was immediate and relentless. Bandages, water, and medical supplies were scarce. Those who could not be treated soon succumbed to injuries and radiation sickness. Amid the chaos, acts of heroism and humanity still shone. Survivors pulled neighbors from the rubble, shielded children from collapsing buildings, and tried to comfort those whose families had been lost. Even in the midst of absolute devastation, some maintained the instinct to help, to care, to survive. The scale of the destruction defied comprehension. Approximately 70,000 people died instantly, and tens of thousands more would succumb in the following weeks. The human cost was staggering. The city, once alive with the ordinary rhythms of daily life, had been transformed into a scene of horror beyond imagination. Many survivors later spoke of the psychological impact. For those who lived, the trauma of that morning remained with them for the rest of their lives. The sounds of the blast, the heat, the screams, the shadows burned into walls, these memories were inescapable. Yet, even amid despair, some glimpsed resilience. People who had lost everything clung to life, carrying the weight of survivors' guilt, searching for signs of hope amid the ruins. Children who survived wandered through streets filled with rubble, instinctively seeking adults who were no longer there. Families were fractured, but the instinct to endure, to find one another, persisted.
In those first hours, Hiroshima was more than a city. It was a living testament to both human vulnerability and resilience.
The city, it had become a symbol of the unimaginable power of atomic weapons, of the human capacity for suffering, and of the enduring spirit of those who lived through the unthinkable. Scientific analysis and Japanese assessment. As the smoke cleared over Hiroshima, the Japanese High Command faced a reality unlike anything they had encountered. The reports from reconnaissance flights and the fragments of radio transmissions painted a picture of total annihilation. No conventional weapon could have caused this. No air raid, no firestorm, no bombardment had ever achieved destruction on such a scale. Among those summoned to assess the situation was Yoshio Nishina, one of Japan's leading physicists. Nishina studied the reconnaissance photographs, observed the flattened city, and began calculations that confirmed the unimaginable. The destruction had been caused by a single bomb, powered by atomic energy. The realization was chilling. The weapon that had erased Hiroshima from the map operated on principles that most people could not fully comprehend. Uranium, split at an atomic level, had released energy of a magnitude never witnessed in human history. The explosion had vaporized tens of thousands of people instantly, reduced entire neighborhoods to ash, and unleashed radiation that would continue to claim lives long after the initial blast. Military strategists and officers convened emergency briefings. They debated what this meant for Japan's ability to continue the war. The calculations were horrifying. Any city could be destroyed in the same manner, and Japan had no means to defend against it. The bomb was not just a weapon, it was a paradigm shift. Conventional strategy, supply lines, and fortifications had become irrelevant.
Reports from Hiroshima detailed the human toll. Shadows burned into walls where people had once stood, rivers carrying the remains of the dead, and survivors suffering from burns and radiation sickness. Emergency response teams tried to assess the scale, but it was nearly impossible. The city's infrastructure had been annihilated. Communications were broken. The Japanese military was effectively blind. The High Command understood, with a dawning sense of dread, that the war had entered a new, terrifying phase. If Hiroshima had been destroyed with one bomb, no other city was safe. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, anywhere could be next. The moral and strategic implications weighed heavily. Could Japan continue fighting? Could any hope remain? Meanwhile, the world outside Japan was beginning to grasp the significance of the atomic bomb. Allied leaders, scientists, and military planners recognized that a new era of warfare had begun, one in which human ingenuity had unlocked a power capable of reshaping the globe. Back in Japan, Nishina and his colleagues worked tirelessly, examining the mechanics of the bomb, trying to understand its energy, its radiation, and its destructive capacity. Their work confirmed the unimaginable. One bomb could erase a city in moments, and no current technology could prevent it. The Japanese leadership now faced a stark choice. Their cities were vulnerable, their military strategies were obsolete. The possibility of surrender, previously unthinkable, now edged closer to necessity. Each passing hour heightened the risk of further destruction. For the survivors, the scientific understanding of the bomb could not lessen their suffering. Burn victims, the injured, the orphaned, and the displaced faced a new reality. Hiroshima would never be the same. The bomb's invisible effects, radiation poisoning, lingering contamination, ensured that the human cost would continue for decades.
The events of Hiroshima also carried a profound ethical and moral weight. Leaders and scientists alike wrestled with the implications of unleashing such a weapon. How could humanity balance the power of atomic energy with the preservation of life? The answers were not clear, and the world would be forced to confront them in the months and years to come. By the end of the day, it was evident to Japan's leaders that Hiroshima was not merely a military target. It was a symbol of the unprecedented destructive power humans had unlocked. The city's obliteration forced the nation to confront an impossible question. How could Japan survive a war in which its cities could be annihilated in an instant? Nagasaki and the end of World War II. Just 3 days after Hiroshima, the shadow of atomic devastation fell upon another Japanese city. Nagasaki on August 9, 1945, the second atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, was released from a B-29 bomber over this bustling industrial port. Like Hiroshima, Nagasaki was filled with ordinary life. Workers at shipyards, families preparing meals, children on their way to school. The city had not expected another strike so soon, and its residents were blissfully unaware of the horror about to descend. The bomb exploded over the city, releasing an energy equivalent to tens of thousands of tons of TNT. Fires erupted across neighborhoods, fueled by timber, paper, and the densely packed buildings. Streets once filled with laughter and commerce were reduced to rubble. The iconic hills surrounding Nagasaki amplified the destructive power, creating pockets of complete devastation. The immediate human toll was staggering. Tens of thousands of people were vaporized or killed instantly, while countless others suffered severe burns, broken limbs, and radiation sickness. Hospitals were overwhelmed beyond capacity, and emergency responders struggled to reach survivors amid the destruction. For the Japanese leadership, the bombing of Nagasaki removed any remaining doubt. The war was unwinnable. 2 cities had been annihilated by a single weapon each, and no further defense could prevent future strikes. Hiroshima had been a warning. Nagasaki was the confirmation.
Faced with this reality, the Japanese government convened urgently. Emperor Hirohito, recognizing the devastation and the futility of further resistance, made the historic decision to surrender unconditionally. On August 15, 1945, he addressed the nation in a radio broadcast, a first for the emperor, speaking directly to his people. In his somber message, Hirohito acknowledged the catastrophic power of the atomic bombs and the suffering endured by the Japanese people. He urged his nation to accept surrender to prevent further destruction.
Millions listened across the country, many in disbelief, others in tears. The 6-year-long war, which had consumed tens of millions of lives worldwide, was finally coming to an end. The surrender marked a new chapter in world history. Japan would be occupied, cities rebuilt, and a new political order established. Yet the human cost of the atomic bombings remained imprinted on the nation's psyche. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were forever scarred, their survivors carrying physical and emotional wounds for decades. Globally, the atomic bombings had sent an unambiguous message. War had entered a new, terrifying era. Nations across the world recognized that humanity now possessed the power to destroy itself entirely. Diplomats, scientists, and political leaders were forced to grapple with the ethical, strategic, and moral implications of nuclear weapons. Despite the devastation, stories of resilience continued to emerge. Survivors rebuilt their lives, communities came together to provide aid, and memorials were constructed to honor the dead. Hiroshima and Nagasaki became symbols not only of destruction, but also of human endurance, reminding the world of both the fragility and resilience of life.
The bombings marked the end of World War II, but they also marked the beginning of a new era, the nuclear age. An era in which humanity would confront the sobering reality that the power it had unleashed could never be fully controlled, and the consequences of its use would echo through generations. For the people of Japan, the atomic bombings were a profound tragedy, a moment that forced the nation to reckon with the limits of survival, the cost of war, and the urgent need for peace. Aftermath: human, environmental, and political. In the weeks, months, and years following the atomic bombings, the full impact of Hiroshima and Nagasaki became painfully clear. The devastation extended far beyond the initial explosions, affecting survivors, the environment, and global politics in ways that would endure for generations. Human toll. For the survivors, known as Hibakasha, life became a daily struggle. Those who had escaped the immediate blast suffered burns, broken bones, and radiation sickness. Many endured chronic illnesses, including anemia, cataracts, and an elevated risk of cancer. Thousands lost their families, their homes, and their livelihoods, leaving them to rebuild their lives from nothing. Psychological trauma was just as severe. Survivors recounted nightmares, flashbacks, and a constant awareness of mortality. Children orphaned by the bomb faced immense challenges, often forced to care for younger siblings or themselves. Communities came together to provide what aid they could, but the scale of suffering was immense.
Medical teams, both Japanese and international, struggled to address the unprecedented injuries. Doctors developed new methods to treat burns, radiation sickness, and psychological trauma. Hospitals were rebuilt, and relief efforts became a critical part of recovery. Yet the scars, both visible and invisible, would remain for decades. Environmental devastation. The bombings also wrought catastrophic damage to the environment. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were transformed into wastelands. Trees were stripped of bark and leaves, rivers were contaminated with debris and human remains, and soil was poisoned with radioactive fallout. Wildlife was affected as well. Birds, fish, and animals exposed to the radiation suffered mutations or died in the immediate aftermath. Forests surrounding the cities were decimated, altering ecosystems and agricultural potential. The city's physical landscapes would take decades to recover, and the memory of the nuclear devastation would shape reconstruction efforts and urban planning for years to come. Political consequences. On a political level, the bombings reshaped the global order. Japan's surrender marked the end of World War II, but it also ushered in the nuclear age, fundamentally altering military strategy and international relations.
Nations recognized that atomic weapons had the potential to obliterate entire populations and cities in moments. The United States emerged as the world's first nuclear power, while the Soviet Union accelerated its own nuclear program, setting the stage for the Cold War. Diplomats, scientists, and world leaders debated the ethics, necessity, and implications of nuclear warfare. The use of atomic bombs on Japan became a central point of discussion in history, military strategy, and global policy.
Japan itself underwent profound changes. The country faced occupation, reconstruction, and a dramatic transformation in governance. Cities like Hiroshima and Nagasaki were rebuilt, not just physically, but socially and politically. Memorials and museums were established to honor the dead and educate future generations. The stories of survivors became a vital part of Japan's collective memory and a warning to the world. The legacy of survivors. Amid the devastation, stories of human resilience and hope persisted. Survivors formed networks to provide aid, share medical knowledge, and advocate for peace. They worked tirelessly to ensure that the horrors they had witnessed would not be forgotten. Annual ceremonies, memorials, and museums in Hiroshima and Nagasaki serve as enduring reminders of the atomic bombings. Shadows burned into walls, rivers filled with ash, and charred landscapes are preserved as symbols of both tragedy and resilience. The human, environmental, and political consequences of Hiroshima and Nagasaki continue to influence the world today. The bombings were not just historical events, they were lessons etched into humanity's collective consciousness, a warning of the destructive power that technology can unleash and the urgent need for ethical stewardship of scientific innovation. Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as monuments to the cost of war, the fragility of life, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. They remind us that the consequences of human actions can resonate far beyond the moment, shaping the world for generations to come. The legacy of the last transmission. Among all the horrors of Hiroshima, one moment stands apart in the historical record: the final radio transmission. Hiroshima. Massive flash. City destroyed. Can't.
Those broken, incomplete words were the last echo of a city before it vanished from the map. The transmission was never finished. Every operator, soldier, and civilian manning radios in Hiroshima was gone. The voice of the city had been silenced forever. Yet that brief, fragmented message became a symbol, both haunting and profound. It was the heartbeat of Hiroshima at the instant it was erased. It represented the lives abruptly ended, the families torn apart, and the ordinary mourning that became extraordinary in tragedy. Historians, scholars, and survivors have reflected on the significance of that last transmission for decades. Unlike photographs or official reports, the broken message conveys immediacy, desperation, and humanity. It is not a statistic or a number. It is a voice, human, fearful, real, captured in a fleeting moment that survived the obliteration of the city. For survivors, the memory of Hiroshima's last voice resonates deeply. It reminds them of the fragility of life, the randomness of survival, and the sheer scale of the disaster. Those who lived carry with them the weight of knowing that their city, once bustling and ordinary, could vanish in an instant. The transmission also carries a warning for the world. It speaks to the power of human innovation and its potential for both creation and destruction. In a few broken words, it communicates the need for ethical responsibility, the consequences of unchecked power, and the urgency of preserving peace. Across generations, the last transmission has inspired memorials, educational programs, and calls for nuclear disarmament. It has become more than a historical artifact. It is a moral touchstone,
reminding humanity of the unthinkable cost of war and the lives erased by choices made in the name of conflict. When people remember Hiroshima, they do not only recall a city destroyed, they recall its voice, its last message, a fragment of human presence that survived the obliteration of the city. That message continues to echo across time, urging reflection, remembrance, and responsibility.
It is a haunting reminder that the lessons of Hiroshima are not confined to the past. They remain vital today, a testament to the consequences of war, the resilience of survivors, and the imperative that history must be remembered if humanity is to avoid repeating its most catastrophic mistakes. Hiroshima's last transmission is a symbol for all generations. Never forget, never repeat. Its voice endures, a bridge between the past and the future, ensuring that the tragedy of that day continues to teach, warn, and inspire. Before we end, take a moment, look at the time and place you're watching this video from right now, and leave it in the comments. Let the world know where you are as you remember the lessons of history. Share this video with your family and friends. History only teaches us when it is passed on, and the story of Hiroshima is a lesson we must never forget. It is time to know the true history, to understand the human cost of war, and to reflect on the resilience of those who survived. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and reflect, then subscribe to this channel for more real moments from the war that changed the world forever. We bring you real voices, real events, and true stories so that history remains alive and meaningful for generations to come. Remember Hiroshima,